everything is an object in Python. How many times have you heard this? Probably a lot. And therefore, functions are objects as well. And you've probably heard this before. Let's dive a bit more into seeing what does it really mean, functions are objects. So what, you might be thinking. Okay, so let me start by pasting in a list. I went on holiday last week. There we go. So now you know. I was in Rome, so all of those are food items I was planning to try out, specialities of Rome. I have tried them all out, more than once, I should say. Good. So that's a list. Brilliant. Let's show the list there. Now, a list is an object. We know that. So if I say what type of object is great food, you know that it's a list. And I can also find all the attributes that are included with this particular object. And there are lots of methods that you may be familiar with. And then there will also be some attributes there. Anyway, not relevant. Let me create a function. Define show food items. Doesn't matter what this function does, right? Let's put in a sequence, and it's going to be great food in my case. And all I'm going to do here is to say print, let's put an F string there. These are the items I enjoyed eating in Rome. Enjoyed eating in Rome. Whatever. And let's say a new line, and let's just do that. In fact, I didn't need a new line there. It doesn't matter. Print. Shall we print? Let's unpack the sequence, and the separator is going to be a new line. Make it pretty. It doesn't matter. If you're familiar with that, great. This is not the main point, right? I just want to create a function that does something. Good. I have actually already created an object. Show food items. If I don't call without the parentheses, but use the name, it's the name of an object, just like great food is the name for the list object, show food items is the name for a function object. Similarities. At the top level, they're all objects. Therefore, they all have attributes. For example, I can find all the attributes that my function object has. And you find many of them are similar to the ones that the list had. New, rep, many objects have those. In fact, all objects have new, or most of them should have rep. In this case, this is callable, so it has call that list doesn't have. Anyway, you can go and compare them. These ones, less than or equal to, are not present there. Sort of makes sense. So there are some similarities, but there are also some differences there. And actually, they are there. There we go. For a function. Never mind. Good. They're all objects. Let me show you what this means. And my methods are functions. Therefore, methods are objects. Let's assign the method great food dot. Which one shall we pick? Let's pick pop without parentheses. So I'm just referring. Now, this is a method, and a method is bound. It's a bound method. In this case, this method is bound to an object. Let's see what it means in a bit. I'm simply giving it another name, right? Because it's an object. I can name any object I want. So I'm naming this object that represents a function or a method in this case. Let's just check what my method is. It's the built-in pop, but not any pop. It's bound, so it's of the list object that. And you'll find that this is the list object great food. Well, if you compare those numbers, this is the hex version of that. It should be anyway. So we've got a method, which is an object. What properties does it have? One of them is self, dunder self. Now, if you've done object-oriented programming, your classes, you're familiar with self. Self is, every time there's an instance method, a method that's bound to an instance, the first parameter is self, the one that we sort of don't put in when we call a method. Why? Because it's implied. So the object is actually attached to the method, or the method is attached to the object, whichever way you want to see it. So this method object has a data attribute called self, which is the list. So there is a reference within this method under the dunder self, which is an attribute. That's a reference to that original list. Where is it? Great food. We can check that they are the same, not a copy, because if I say what's the ID of whatever is inside self for my method, it's this number which ends in 6752, which is the same as the ID for great food. Therefore, this is not a copy of the list. This is the same list. In fact, if I say my method dot, let's remove one of them. Not my method, apologies. I want to remove from great food. That's my list. So great food is that list at the moment. And I want to remove one of them. Now, I actually liked all of them, so I don't want to remove any of them, but for the argument, so did I spell that correctly? Yes, I did. There. So great food no longer has one of the lovely dishes I had last week. And if I check my method.self, well, that's referring to the same list, so that's also gone. So a function, a method in this case, just a function, has attributes, and one of the attributes there is the self, the object, the instance of the instance that the method is attached to. This is important because a method needs to have access to the information in the object. Let me show you one other example of where we can use sort of a weird way where we can use the fact that functions are objects. We can create our own data attributes. Why not? Let's say I want to define, in fact, let's do the same function we had before. Where is it? There. Define show food items. Now, show food items is the name I'm giving to an object. It's an object of type function. It's an object that's a function. With objects, we can add data attributes to them. So for example, here I can say show food items, not the name of the object. I want to add to it a data attribute called counter. Now, I'm going to take a shortcut here. So let's assume that we already have a data attribute called counter, which we don't. I want to increase it by 1. This means that every time I call the function, doesn't matter, the calls are separate, but the function will keep track of how many times it's being called. Now, the problem is that this needs to exist. Why? If I call the function now, in fact, I haven't called the function at all, right, so far. If I say show food items using great food, I'm going to get an error. Function object has no attribute counter. Of course it doesn't. I've never created it. Here I'm simply incrementing it. So just for this example, let's create it. And of course, we're going to make it equal to 0. I haven't called the function yet at the beginning. Now, I can call show food items. And you can see it's showing me here, there are, not there are, it should have been, here are the items I enjoyed in Rome, never mind. How about show food items.counter? It's now showing the value of 1, which means I've called it once. Let me call the function again, and again. I've called it 2 more times now, so it should be 3 in all. And you'll see that show food items.counter is now showing 3. So I have added a data attribute, in this case counter, which is bound to the function object, not to the function call. Whenever I call the function, there's only one counter because there's only one function. It doesn't matter how many times I call it. But the counter will increase every time I call it. I'll keep this video brief. If you're interested in more, I published an article just before I went on holiday, so you'll see references to my holiday here. This was on the way to the airport, well, almost, not quite, just before I left for the airport. I'm one of you, said the function, the other objects. It explores a lot more the topics I've discussed here, but a bit more, including with the last example, a neater way of doing it using decorators. So if you want to find out more about quirks, related to the fact that functions are actually objects. That's the article for you on the Python coding stack. And they're often called first-class objects. And since I was traveling, I was trying to see whether anyone would want to upgrade me to first class just because they pity me. But no one did, so I flew in economy. There we go. That's enough for today.